campus is actually for DJing breakdancing competitions. I'm back here on a medical basis and doing this kind of thing. My name is Dr. Jonathan Fields. My doctorate, my master's is in acupuncture and Eastern medicine. I've been in martial arts my whole life. That's how I got drawn into this. I've studied with this gentleman here for the last 19 plus years. I met him probably 2002, 2005, 2004, 2005 through my martial arts school and started studying with him at that time. He's also an acupuncturist and a shaman in a couple of different Western African tribes and Native American medicine, and the first person to introduce me to Egyptology, right, and NLP and tapping and juice fasting and all these kinds of things. So he just happened to be here today. It wasn't planned, so we're going to freestyle this a little bit. I saw him sitting over there. I said, well, if I'm speaking, you're speaking with me. And I'd be remiss to not have my Qi Gong Grandmaster up here with me speaking. So outside of studying with him, I spent time in China living with Shaolin monks, living in the temples over there and studying, and a whole bunch of other studies outside of that. I'll let you speak to me and we'll get into it.
I got first introduced to LSD when I was 17 years old from one of Timothy Leary's graduate students. So I was always on a psychedelic trip, and I took mescaline, but then when I got into mushrooms, that completely exploded me, and my first dose was 10 grams.
Jeez.
Oh my God. First, it lasted 8.5 hours. So I knew intimately this was the right thing to shift people's awareness of self-limiting beliefs, automatic negative thoughts, and self-destructive behaviors. That's what we repair.
So yes, my first psychedelic experience was at 14, back in 1994, high school, as well as also with LSD. Later on, got into mushrooms and some other things. Kind of left that alone for a while after high school, try to turn my life around, do the right thing. And then being into the medical thing the last 10 years, you start hearing, well, now mushrooms are good for you. Now there's science behind it. Now it's helping patients. And at this point, I have 2 clinical practices, one in Coral Springs, one in the West Boca area. And we have patients that come in all the time with severe mental health issues, right? Anxiety, depression, PTSD, all sorts of other issues. And they've tried all the medications. They've done therapy. They've done everything. And a lot of times it just doesn't work. Not only that, a lot of times they get worse and worse. Then they're starting to get side effects from the medications. They're coming in, they go and complain to the doctors about the side effects from the medications. And a lot of times the doctors are just straight up gaslighting them and telling them, oh, no, it's not a side effect from that. We'll give you some more medications on top of that to deal with the side effects of these medications. So I am for advocating, one, as a trained herbalist, for anything natural that can help people and for patients to have options, to have access to these kinds of things. I was actually one of the doctors that just was part of the appeal that just went into the DEA to reschedule psilocybin from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. There's a third appeal that just went in based on the right to try laws. Thank you. It's Dr. Sunil Agrawal was the first one who appealed to them from the Ames Institute. And the right to try laws are federal laws that they have federally and in 41 states, I believe. And what they say is if you're dying and there is a drug that's investigational, and if it's already gone through phase 1 clinical trials and it's been proven safe and effective, they are legally allowed, the patients are legally allowed to try this. However, the DEA is still denying people access. They're still not allowing patients to have these. And psilocybin is actually going into phase 3 clinical trials, right? Compass and some of these other people. So I was lucky to get involved in this petition. My name and my bio, and I was actually able to contribute some information, and they used some of the language in the petition as well. And now we're privileged, and thank you, Dr. Vidot, and everybody who's put this event together to be able to speak, and hopefully everybody can take some of this information and spread it and share the knowledge. But that being said, I think let's talk a little bit about Taoism and psychedelics and the practice itself.
So the number one stressor is not anger, it's actually fear. And most fears are irrational except for fear of death and fear of the unknown. Those are the only 2 rational fears. And when you're afraid, there's a physiological reaction of tightening the quadratus lumborum in the back and the hamstrings below the pelvis. And these two muscles tighten up whenever you experience fear and or anxiety, which freezes the pelvis and affects the urogenital system. Now, fear transforms into anger, and anger is a big poison pot of frustration, resentment, shame, blame, guilt, and depression. So you kind of like shift back and forth. And so now I'm angry, my chest goes out, my back goes up, I have fear, my low back tightens up, I'm worried, my abdominals tighten up. So how do we create balance out of that? Because it is the fear and the anxiety and the depression and the anger, and we keep spinning like this, and this is what causes mental illness in America, and mental illness keeps climbing every year. So how can we defeat these polar opposites of anger, fear, worry, and sadness? And the answer is in the psilocybin, because it takes away your anxiety level, it takes away your fear, it takes away your worry. And we've been self-medicating for decades with cannabis and other unmentionable things that are potentially harmful. And now we have something that's not harmful, that at 200 times normal dosage, there's no toxicity in the blood. So from a Taoist perspective, the way we deal with anger is we expand and contract, expand and contract. And by doing this, you tighten the muscle and you expand the muscle. You tighten and you expand, which increases blood flow. Now, where do we want the blood to go? We want it to go to the brain. But your neck is too tense from texting and Ubering, right? And so you're tense, so the blood can't get to the brain. But when you do the mushrooms, you feel, and you can roll around on the grass and hug the tree. And you can actually feel good about yourself.
There's a Taoist and Buddhist concept, right? Wu Ji.
Wu Ji.
Right? Or Wu Xin. Which, Wu Ji would be like an empty state or empty stance, and Wu Xin would be empty mind. And what do we do when we're having a psychedelic experience, right? We're told to let go, to surrender. And as we're practicing Qi Gong and these things, the Wu Ji is empty stance, or doing standing meditation or any of these meditations, we're looking to dissolve. We're looking to dissolve stress out of the body. We're looking to dissolve any blockages, whether they be emotional, traumatic, or actual physical blood clots or whatever it is. We're looking to dissolve negative emotions out of the body and let them melt out back into the earth where they could be recycled into positive energy. The same way the trees recycle the carbon into oxygen, the earth being a huge electromagnet takes all our negative emotions and it knows how to recycle them. And these are traditional Taoist concepts, right, in the Qi Gong. Now, we had a brief discussion earlier. There's not a lot of information from Taoism and Buddhism on the psychedelics, and a lot of that was probably written out by the government. Right? When the revolution came in, they tried to hide a lot of the stuff. They reorganized traditional Chinese medicine. At first they outlawed it, but then they had to bring it back because they didn't have enough Western trained doctors to treat a billion people, and they couldn't afford to do that way. So they had to bring this back, now it's part of their national heritage. So there is mention in the Materia Medica of the Chinese medicine of different entheogenic plants, but they really just talk about them as being, causing mania or a laughing drug or kinds of things like this. They're not really mentioning them in a spiritual aspect. But if you look at some of the Taoist artwork, right, the mandalas or even the allegories that they have for the body and the systems, the charts, you want to maybe speak a little about that?
Well, I found this book. It was a coffee table book, and it said psychedelics in Tibetan medicine. They would not let me buy the book. It was a display copy. And it was out of print. Wow. So I went nuts because I couldn't get the information. But last week I went on Amazon, and there's a British guy who is painstakingly tracked every mention of any type of psychedelic in Buddhism and written it down and done research. So next year we'll present information from that book.
I like the sound of that.
Fantastic. And going back to the emotions and the organs, that's something I want to discuss, and we'll go over in the workshop tomorrow. We're going to actually have a Qi Gong workshop tomorrow, and if Dr. Love's available, I'll have him teach it with me as well. But he spoke a little bit about the kidney storing the fear, right? So within the Taoism and the Qi Gong, we actually use our mind to, and our Yi, our intent, to cleanse every single organ and emotion. Every organ has different emotions and different colors associated with it, and we'll go through some of that tomorrow. But let's go through some, you mentioned fear and you mentioned anger, right? So fear and fright is the kidneys. Anger is?
The liver, which controls the muscles. Grief and
Attachment to wrong ideas attack the lungs. So you go, Uncle Fred died, and you literally tighten your chest, which means you cannot breathe in because you compress the chest. Now worry causes the abdominal muscles to contract, which cuts off blood supply to the digestive organs. And that makes you either completely lose your appetite or overeat. So worried people eat too much because they're trying to quell that muscular contraction in the digestive organs.
There's a pathology in Chinese medicine called liver overacting on spleen, right? So the spleen and the stomach are the digestive system in the Eastern medicine, as well as the pancreas is attached to the spleen, right? And so we just mentioned anxiety and worry is the emotions of the spleen, and stress and anger and frustration are the emotions of the liver. So when you get too stressed, right, you get too tight, and then it affects your digestive system. And what do they tell you the cause of IBS is these days, right? Besides all the junk that we're eating, but right, they'll just, oh, it's stress, it's stress, it's stress. They'll just blame everything on stress. So this was known. We didn't need MRIs to tell us this, because this was written thousands of years ago, right?
Thousands of years ago. So now, silly question, what affects the heart? Abandonment, rejection, betrayal, and abuse, and sadness and loneliness.
And on the flip side, you have joy and happiness,
Overjoy.
bliss, overjoy.
Overjoy.
If you're overjoyed at the inappropriate times, that's a problem too. If we're at a funeral and you're cracking up in the corner, there's a problem, or maybe you ate too many mushrooms, right?
So, what is the #1 disease in America? Heart disease. So, what are all these things that cause us to compress the heart? Because we're afraid of losing. So, I don't want my lover to move to Japan. I don't want my job to move to California.
Or my family believes in this cult and I'm not having it. So I have these disconnects. I have the betrayal, the rejection, the abuse, the heart hurt. So what's the only way to avoid that is open your heart. Open your mind to see the light and have the courage to change your life. And it all starts with a microdose.
Or 10 grams.
There you go.
Or 10 grams.
And we don't want the heart to be closed off, right? Because then we're constricted, and then we have these issues with stagnation and stasis. And even back then, we knew that the #1 cause of disease was stagnation. Stasis. We look at today, they tell you sitting is the new smoking, right? Because it's damaging your kidneys, it's damaging your circulation. We could cause clotting in the legs. We know on airplanes we got to move around and stretch out and all that kind of stuff. So this is ancient technology. And I think you were one of the first people to tell me that a lot of the Tibetan and even the Chinese medicine came up through Egypt and worked its way up.
The origin of Egyptian battlefield medicine spread through Greece to China, through Persia to India, then through Rome to
Turkey, Afghanistan, Mongolia, and lastly it ended up in Tibet. And then Tibet held medical contests, inviting everybody in and reconglomerated Egyptian medicine. So what we call Tibetan medicine is actually ancient Egyptian medicine.
The Chinese were also very, very organized. So they would get all these doctors from all over the world, and they would come and they would document everything. So we have actual clinical textbooks. The only medical textbooks we have going that far back are actually from Egypt and China. I think there's a lot more volumes of things that were left from ancient China because it wasn't destroyed by other regimes that came in and off the last dynasty off the face of the map. So there's we have more documentation on that kind of stuff. But yes, they included all this kind of technology into the Chinese medicine, and traditional Chinese medicine as it is today has bits and pieces of all sorts of medicine.
Everything is a conglomeration. They found these caves in Dunhuang, China, which is on the border of Tibet. 70,000 books just shoved in there, not shelved, not boxed, just shoved in there and covered over. And it must have been a political regime purge that wanted to get rid of all the books.
So within the Tao sense, and tomorrow what we'll do is we'll actually do some demonstrations of these. So in the workshops, we'll actually go through and we'll teach how to actually go through organ by organ and cleanse these negative emotions, how to dissolve these blockages out of your body. Using your intention, but also physically, using external movements such as these, right? If anybody's not familiar, who's not familiar with Qi Gong in the room? I know we got a few. Okay, so for those who are not familiar, I'll just briefly go over the terminology, right? Qi we can think of as energy, which when this came over to this country, first they put it as, oh, this is woo-woo medicine, this is not real medicine. It could not be further from the truth. You could not be any more scientific. What is the body made out of, right? What are our endocrine system, our digestive system, right? These are all chemical reactions. These are all energetic processes. What's our nervous system work on, right? Electrical charges, right? We're hot, we're warm inside, our body makes sound. So these are all different types of energy. So to put that as unscientific is unscientific, right? And a lot of this stuff has been proven by the scientific method, which was you repeat the experiment over and over and over and over. So no, yeah, they didn't have randomized controlled clinical double-blind studies from 2,000 years ago, but this has been practiced on billions of people for thousands of years. There's nothing more scientific than that.
So Chinese medicine actually created the scientific method, which was create a hypothesis and then see if it can be duplicated. So what's the dosage of this plant as a poison? Well, I'm going to feed it to a pig until the pig dies. That's the maximum dosage. And now I'm going to
take 7 grams today, and I'm going to take 14 grams tomorrow, and I'm going to take 21 grams the next day, and then 28 grams until I reach a therapeutic dosage. So now, using the scientific method, I've determined that there's a therapeutic dose and there's a fatal dose. So now I'm going to find a way to measure and say, okay, you need 500 milligrams 3 times a day, and you need 100 milligrams once a day. And that's how we started out with dosage based upon weight.
And further than that, they actually classified it, even going back thousands of years ago, by the taste, the energy of the herb, the flavor of the herb, what organs, what channels it entered, right? And the different functions. Each herb would have 5 different functions and different flavors. And the other thing that's interesting about the Eastern medicine and Taoism and all this is things are prescribed differently based on your body type and your constitution.
Right.
We have very different genetics. We have different past life generational traumas and stuff. When I tried to live on his diet, it didn't work well for me, right? So, if you're more hot, you might get cooling herbs. If you're more cold, you might get warming herbs. So these are just different examples of things where it's customized. And this is part of the problem with medicine today, as we know in allopathic medicine and Western medicine. Everybody's treated on symptoms. If you have anxiety and I have anxiety and everybody in here has anxiety, you're all getting the same standard protocol. It's not going to work. We know it doesn't work. Now we got to figure out why and what can we do to change it. Right? The other thing that I like, I've been speaking about these conferences, and I think most of you all will be familiar with it, is the integration, right? We're talking about, there's a lot of talk about the psychedelics. There's a lot of talk about therapy, right? But it's everything else, right? It's, if you're not changing, right? For the person, we have these patients come in and, right, they're drinking 8 cups of coffee a day and they're having 3 diet sodas with dinner and a box of Oreos after dinner. Doesn't matter how many mushrooms you take, you're not getting better. You're not getting that shit first. Right? So a lot of that's being left out. So as this is being medicalized and as people are making money from this kind of thing, and as these big corporations are coming in and trying to take over and patent all these drugs, that's something that's kind of being left behind. So that's one of the things with the Eastern medicine, with a lot of indigenous type of medicine, they had the lifestyle. They ate off the land. They danced, they sang, they chanted, they played the drums, right? These are all medicines. This is all technology that we need to incorporate into our lives. And if we're not doing it, you're not going to be healthy. You're not going to have a good mental state. You're not going to have a good physical state. And you're not going to have a good spiritual state. And one of the things we talk about in Taoism, right, or you mentioned, Brother Dooley mentioned the Dantians, right? So we have the 3 Dantians within Taoism and Qi Gong, right? Yeah, it's kind of like the chakra system in Ayurvedic medicine, but the Chinese simplified it into 3. Do you want to go over that?
And it's so easy. We've got the fertility Dantian that we call Jing, and then we've got the circulatory system, which is the lungs and the heart, that we call Qi. And then we have the Shen, which is the neuromuscular system, which is part of the neuroendocrine and the musculoskeletal. So we add those two together and it becomes neuromuscular. So we think that we're this meat suit on a hanger of bones, but the bones have nerves, the bones have muscles, the bones have blood. And the bones need hormones to work properly. So the neuromuscular system operates what we call the physical body, but we also have an emotional body, we have an energy body, and we have a spirit body. Okay? So let's say her daughter was in India and got held up for ransom. She would wake up before the phone would call and say, there's something wrong with my daughter. I can feel it. And then the phone rings. That's the spirit.
So they call this Tien Ren Di, right? And these are the 3 Dantians, and these are the 3 planes. Tien is the heavens, right? We're getting in the cosmic energy, the heavenly Qi coming down through the crown, right, into your upper Dantien, right? Ren is the plane of mankind and womankind, humankind, right? It's the we talk about the heart and the lungs, the Qi, the circulation, and then D is the earth, right? So that's your genital functions, but also the digestive system, the grains, the food, the water. So Tien Ren Di, those are the 3 planes that we walk in, right? And you have the same thing that you see in the Andean culture, right? If you're in Peru, right, you have the condor, the jaguar, and the snake. Same thing.
Same exact thing.
I was just on the picture. You have about 5 minutes. If you'd like to take questions before you run.
Yeah.
Let's do some questions.
How are you implementing psilocybin into your practices now?
I am hosting retreats in clinic. I mean, that's why I got on the petition to the DEA. Legally, we cannot. We can, kind of work a little bit as a concierge and kind of like advise, like, hey, can you do a little research? Clinically, we cannot recommend a patient to go out and try any substances that are illegal. We can lose our license for that. I got kids to feed. We got things to do. So unfortunately, that's part of the problem. And that's why we're doing these kinds of things. And that's why the education is important. Outside of that, yeah, I'm doing retreat and advocating and speaking and getting involved legally and all these kinds of things. It's a travesty that we cannot. And I don't need to sell it in the clinic. I don't need to prescribe it. But my patients need to have the option to try other things. When the drugs have failed them, they need to have the option. And I believe it should be, hey, if you could grow it at home, right? Now it's like, oh, I can only refer them to a ketamine clinic. It's not for everybody. You'll never catch me in there with a IV in my arm doing ketamine. It's not going to happen. Right? I'll sit in ceremony. before any of that goes down, and it's expensive, right? So I think we should have home grow options, and people should be able to learn on their own and take these therapies into their own hands.
Nothing against ketamine, it's just not for him.
Yeah, exactly.
I just really want to reiterate, everybody in this room has a place and a purpose at the table. As a medical doctor, isn't a really important piece.
Totally.
Educating, getting it into the medical schools, getting it as questions on, we're in the school of nursing here. Nurses need to learn about this stuff. There is regulations over the governing body of nurses for years now that nurses in general have no idea exist, but we're supposed to be following them. So, while it may sound passive, hey, I got kids to feed and, it's illegal,
Well, we're here, we're doing it.
education
Where it starts.
is key because it's not going to move the needle. It's also not going to bring equity to people that don't have licenses, that have been doing this for centuries, and their work needs to be brought into the light and also in to be able to feed their kids.
Right.
So it starts really, we got to attack it from everywhere, and everybody here has a role to play.
Nurse Elizabeth Hayes. Clear. Both of us, our doctorate and our master's is actually in acupuncture and oriental medicine. In the state of Florida, we are considered primary health care providers. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question, but a comment. I completely identify a lot with what you're doing. As you saw from my presentation, I'm doing pretty much the same thing you're doing, but I don't have the certificate or the licensure to do it. So just thank you very much for putting yourself on the front lines. Me and my children.
Thank you.
Question.
What's your contact info?
Oh.
You can reach me at area code 561 502 6200.
Is it Dr. Qi Love on Instagram?
Oh, it's
At Dr. Qi Love, Q-I Love, minus at Jonathan M. Fields, Jonathan Fields, like it sounds. So it's at Jonathan M. Fields, at Dr. Qi Love. You have a question back, sir?
Are you all insurance code?
In my clinic, I take insurance in my clinic. I don't think you do.
I decided not to take
I'm
insurance.
50-50.
Okay.
What's your contact information, Dr. Fields?
You can find me, just you look me up on Instagram or Facebook, just at Jonathan M. Fields, and that's no H in the beginning. Jonathan, the letter M like Matthew, Fields. Jonathan M. Fields. And then there's links to all my stuff from there. Any other questions?
Can I help?
Yeah. That's right.
So we can take you away and do a clinical trial on you with a disclaimer, and you're monitored for 48 hours. Okay? So this is something that you're doing. I'm just monitoring. All right? So I'm not administering, I'm monitoring.
Understood.
So there's a way to cross all the T's and dot all the I's.
Yeah, but if you look us up, we actually we have retreats. I'm going to be doing stuff in the Bahamas soon as well. So
As well as amazing food I hear at these retreats.
from our wife, chef, and also acupuncturist, Dr. Lauren Fields. Phenomenal chef, and yes, she's the chef for our retreats, and this stuff is just outstanding. But yeah, if you follow us on Instagram, you see some pictures and flyers for some